anthropomorphic and admittedly premised on man as human persons. Because the human mind, however, cannot possibly conceive of a non-anthropomorphic person, reference to God as person or persons is nothing more than literary personification. Who can think of some person that is not some being? Yet this is how the Trinity is consistently, theologically portrayed and spoken of, as if the Trinity were three individual beings or entities. The term person not only promotes anthropomorphism, but tritheism as well. She said once, if you removed the word person from Christian theology, the whole thing would fall down like a row of dominoes back to the 2nd century. Although Clement of Alexandria, 150 to 215, referred to God as the true subject of Jesus, this was not a reference to God as subject, but to the subject Jesus, whose deepest subjective experience of being was God. This was Clement's reference to Jesus' unitive state of apatheia or theosis. Of course, Jesus was not God's being. Rather, God was Jesus' personal experience of God's being. God is the true being of all that exists, and the unitive state of being is the experience of being one with God's being. The big mistake, of course, is concluding that because God is one's deepest true being, this makes the experiencer himself to be God's own being or self, makes him Almighty God. Transposing man's human knowing and experiences to God, however, is just another attempt to make God into man's image of himself. The Antiochenes regarded Christ's unitive state of being to mean his whole person was in accord with God's will and mind. They never agreed God replaced Jesus' own will and mind, replaced his own subject or personal identity. Cyril of Alexandria is the one who substituted Jesus' human subject or self for God, as if God was a subject or self. He was absolutely wrong in this because God is no person, no subject or self. Yet, this is the present Orthodox view, namely that God's own self-identity, I am, person or subject, was Jesus' sole self-identity, I am. This, however, is a piece of Orthodox Hinduism. Who you really are is Almighty God. So let all those who believe this go east, where they too can discover, like Jesus, they are God. This, at least, is Cyril's Christology, considered totally orthodox. Thank God for the Antiochenes, who never countenanced his erroneous Christology. So basically she's saying the Alexandrian Christology has won out and the Antiochean Christology has been all but forgotten. Here's a little footnote which you might want to tell to your Jewish friends. When those who go east discover they are not God, they will either come back or resign themselves to the belief they must be reincarnated 10,000 times before they can discover they really are God. The reason this belief is incompatible with Christianity is because to be Christ is not to be God, but to be eternally one with God. People who think they should be God or realize they are God do not know what they are saying. A genuine revelation of the transcendent is all people would need to flock to Judaism, because they know they are not that and could never be that. Where, by itself, the Logos can tend to pantheism, being omnipresent in creation, and the indwelling spirit in man can tend to the belief that one's own being is God. The transcendent, however, blows these wrong beliefs out of the water. This is just another example of how the Trinity, God's modus operandi, exists in divine equilibrium that not only keeps man in balance, but keeps him on the right path of truth. It is because Cyril denied Jesus was a human person, Nestorius asked, how can you have a complete human being, an individual, that is not a person? In other words, if God was the person of Jesus, then how is God not, like Jesus, an individual being? to believe God is some individual being or three beings, and there goes monotheism. What we have instead is some form of monistic pantheism. Making God a human person called for a communication of properties. This is another wrong turn. The reason that substituting one of God's divine persons, logos, to be or act as the human person of Jesus did not work is because all the fathers held God to be impassible, not subject to human experiences with all its changes, ups and downs. Thus, thinking everything Jesus said and did from birth to death was God in person doesn't work because it's not the truth. To take care of this problem, they came up with the communication of properties, which holds that even though God did not experience anything, birth, walking, talking, suffering, and dying, yet because Jesus' human nature belonged to or was the property of the divine person of the Logos, then everything experienced by God's own human nature could be attributed or said to belong to the Logos' divine person. This way, though God experienced nothing, yet all Jesus' human experiences and sayings could be attributed to God as if they belonged to God or were God's own words and experiences, which of course they were not. Even as a divine person, God is impassible. A monophysitic Christ. The understanding that because God, Logos, as a person has one divine nature, therefore Christ, as a divine person, has one divine nature, this is monophysitism. Since Christ's body or flesh was one with God, then Christ is one divine enfleshed individual being. And who is this divine being? It is the Logos, one of God's eternal modes of existence, God's immanent modus operandi. But where is the man Jesus in this? He was flesh, a material being, a human person, the only one who could be seen at least. But even if Jesus' human nature was only flesh, and the natures were united in a divine person, this does not make Christ one being, much less of one divine nature. To say Christ is one person is solely a reference to who some individual being is. It is not a reference to what that individual being is. Thus, Christ is not one individual being, not one God, not one hypostasis, not one nature, not even one human being. To think a divine person is one individual divine being is tritheism, and to think a divine person is an individual human being is monophysitism. Yet, this view of Christ as one divine person, one divine being, one divine nature minus the flesh is the proverbial party line's monophysitic presentation of Christ. No one denied Christ a physical body, yet even granting Jesus a human soul never changed the view of Jesus as one divine being. So basically she's saying Christianity is monophystic. Switch in the ontology of being, another big switch, another wrong turn. The ontological problem of Christ is that the union of two disparate natures does not constitute a single individual being. The only way Christ can be understood as a single ontological being is as a single person, even though, by definition, person is not the essence or nature of being. Still, it was by making Christ one individual being that Christ came to be understood as one individual being. It was by making Christ one individual person that Christ came to be understood as one individual being. Where philosophically the reality of ontological being is based on the essence of nature, of what something is, now, however, this had to be switched from what being is to who a being is. One excuse for this switch was because no one knows what God is in the first place, or even what man really is. Thus, the ontology of being had to switch from what is not known, or essence, to who is known, or person. As one divine person, then, this is not only who Christ is, but who God is. one of the three divine persons. Another excuse for this